After what seems like years of speculation, we finally know what Volvo's next generation electric vehicle is going to look like. It's the new Volvo EX90. This may or may not replace the XC90 in the long run. Volvo has actually said they're going to continue building the current generation XC90 right alongside the EX90. So if you get your XCs and your EXs confused, I will forgive you because these are going to be on the same dealer lot at the same time. Let's dive into the details that we have been able to uncover on the new EX90, and we'll decide whether or not you might want one. The first thing to know is it's going to have the biggest battery pack that Volvo has ever built, a 107 kilowatt hour usable pack. Actual capacity is a little bit larger than that, but 107 kilowatt hours is going to be usable. So this is a bigger battery pack in terms of usable capacity than we find on the Tesla Model X. That's probably going to be needed because this is much less jelly bean shaped than the Model X or the Mercedes-Benz EQS, which I think is a definite valid competitor to this, even though the EQS is going to be a lot more expensive. Now, that battery pack is a 17-module unit, and it's a CATL manufactured battery, which is kind of interesting because the EX90 is going to be built in South Carolina. Yep, it's going to be built in the United States, so all American-bound ones should qualify for the assembly credit on the base trims, because the base trims are going to be under $80,000. That is under the price cap, manufactured here, therefore you get $3,750. But they may never qualify for the battery tax credit because the battery components are built by CATL, most likely in China, although I haven't been able to get a good answer on that. Now, exactly how big is the EX90? Well, it's a little bit bigger than the current generation XC90, and it's pretty roomy inside. This is thanks to the flat battery floor under the vehicle, so it's not going to occupy any cargo area. We're going to get 110 inches just under of combined legroom. That's really key because I was worried that the EX90 would be a little smaller on the inside. The EQS, again, these letters are a little confusing, EQS SUV, is not exactly roomy in the third row. The EX90, on the other hand, looks like it will actually be roomier on the inside than the XC90, and that is kind of an interesting twist. So legroom is going to be pretty similar to the Q7, the MDX, the Discovery, and just 1 inch combined legroom less than the BMW X7. Now, not all the measurements that we have been given are based on standard North American measuring techniques, so some of these have been converted from European measurements, so things may massage along a little bit when we finally get US specifications. The third row headroom figure is pretty impressive, 35.8 inches, so that's pretty similar to the Audi Q7. It is a hair less than the MDX, though, and about 1.5 inches less than the BMW X7. So not an enormous third row, but still definitely usable. Now, at this point in time, I don't have any good figures for cargo capacity because those are definitely measured differently in Europe and in the US. It's probably going to be somewhere around 10 cubic feet would be my guess. It's not going to be that much bigger than the current generation XC90. Interesting twist, we do have a bigger front trunk than Volvo has ever given us before. It looks like it's about big enough for a duffel bag, perhaps a large backpack. It's not enormous. It does have trays on the side for things like your charge cable, charge adapters, etc., and then a small well where you could actually store luggage. We don't know all the details on this next generation platform for Volvo, but I suspect it was designed from the ground up to also accommodate an ICE platform at some point, perhaps a plug-in hybrid. Volvo obviously won't give us any details, but I wouldn't be surprised if some variant of this platform was an ICE-based vehicle, or a plug-in hybrid, I should say. Now, we know that this is basically the same platform that we're going to find in the Polestar 3, and that has caused some speculation about design on the XC90. And let me clarify that one. Everything that we have seen from Polestar so far was designed by Volvo. Volvo owns half of Polestar, and then Geely owns the other half. But Volvo is definitely where all the engineering talent and all the designs came from that we see in everything in the Polestar lineup, including exactly how they sort of differentiated the Polestar lineup from Volvo. Yes, Polestar has their own designers and their own employees now, but it's not that EX90 was designed or influenced by Polestar. This is 100% Volvo. Traditional car development cycles are quite long. This design has long been in the works, years in the works. Now, it is interesting that Volvo has gone a little outside their comfort zone in some ways, but it definitely is instantly recognizable as a Volvo. Let's go over some of the details because that's where we see the design direction change. First thing, the taillights. We have the dedicated C-shaped taillights that we have seen evolving in other models with the lights that run up the back pillars from there, but they're not part of the taillight module anymore. We get some cool animations. More cool animations are found on the headlights. These are multi-matrix headlights, so pretty similar tech to what we find in the Germans, but the startup animation sequence is really unique when you really look at this closely. It looks like when the vehicle is off during the day, the shutters are going to be closed, closing off the actual headlight elements. So all you're going to see are these sort of chevron-themed things for that Thor's hammer arrangement. Then when you turn the vehicle on, they're going to animate, and then the louvers will open, revealing the headlights. It's kind of a cool look. I wonder how reliable that would be. It kind of reminds me of some of the headlight modules from the 1980s, but these are completely sealed, so you aren't going to have the same worry about salt intrusion or water intrusion or things like that inside the module, because that's entirely sealed, so that could help make them more reliable long term. Now, as far as dates go, this is going to be on sale early 2024, so it's a pretty long wait for Americans. You'll be able to put your deposit down and order one, or just order one, they haven't really been specific on that process, in fall of 2023. Now let's talk about what makes the EX90 go. There are going to be two different power levels. All-wheel drive will be standard, which is an interesting twist. So unlike the EQS SUV, which starts as rear-wheel drive, this will be dual motor all the time. The base model will give you 402 horsepower, 568 pound-feet of torque. Now, we don't know whether these are the same motors that we currently find in the XC40 EV, or whether this is a next-generation motor design that's going to move back into the XC40. But I would not be surprised if that was the case. Volvo tends to do things in a pretty logical, organized fashion, where components are upgraded and then they're distributed across the lineup once they're available. So this could bode well for efficiency gains in some of their other EVs. 0 to 60 times with this dual motor setup, 5.7 seconds according to Volvo. That model will give you about 300 miles of range, they're saying, for the North American model. Critical key point there. Performance on the performance version is going to bump that down to 4.7 seconds, 0 to 60, thanks to a motor upgrade, 496 horsepower, a whopping 610 pound-feet of torque. Remember that Volvo's decision with the split between Volvo and Polestar is to make Polestar the performance option, Volvo the more luxury, family-oriented option. So I would not be surprised if this was as fast as this model ever got. Now about the battery pack. This is a 400-volt nominal system. There's been a lot of debate around this, but I don't mind the fact that it's still a 400-volt system because Volvo has focused on fast peak charge rates and a sustained charge rate that seems to be pretty quick. Interesting twist, you don't actually need to have an 800-volt EV to charge at 250, 260 kilowatts. Tesla has proved that because none of their EVs are 800-volt EVs, and they charge among the fastest in the industry because they can sustain a charge rate pretty long, and they really hit the maximum peak for that 400-volt base system. That seems to be what we're going to see in the Volvo. Peak charge rates of 250 kilowatts, and more impressive, a 10% to 80% charge rate of 26 minutes, or I should say charge time of 26 minutes, and 0% to 80% in 31 minutes. That is definitely very, very fast. That really puts this right in line with the Tesla Model X, the Mercedes-Benz EQS, and even the Lucid Air in terms of the average charge rate across that window. Now, obviously, you'll have to wait until I can get my hands on the EX90 to really run it through its tests and see if it achieves that charge rate, but I wouldn't be surprised because other manufacturers have been able to do that. I have to say I'm pretty impressed by the range figures because the EX90 looks to be a lot boxier than the EQS, and it's just about as heavy as an EQS. It's going to weigh in at 6,200 pounds for the base model. That seems to be a little bit lighter versus the EQS SUV because the EQS SUV starts at around that curb weight, but it's a single motor vehicle. The dual motor models are heavier, and it appears that the heaviest versions of the EX90 aren't going to be that much above 6,200 pounds. That's still a pretty hefty curb weight though, so don't expect this to handle quite like some of the sharper, lighter options that you'll find outside of the battery electric segment. But Volvo's putting pretty wide tires on this. It looks like it's going to have the widest tire that Volvo has ever put on a production vehicle. 295 width tires are going to be available. It appears that they're going to be tied with some of the air suspension options and other option packages on the EX90. The base model, it appears, is going to have a staggered tire setup, likely 255s in the front, 265s in the rear. That's another interesting twist. It appears that Volvo is going to be putting the wider tire in the back. The last thing to mention before we move on is that this is going to be the first Volvo to support bidirectional charging. No specifics have been given exactly how that's going to work. It's probably going to be the J1772 connector, and it's probably going to support vehicle to load and vehicle to grid. Details are still sketchy, however. Now let's talk about some of the other things that are going to be standard. In the center of the dash, we're going to find a 14.5-inch infotainment screen. It's going to be running the latest Google operating system and a much faster processor. In fact, this is going to have some of the most advanced computing tech on board, which is really an interesting twist. Not just for the infotainment system, but also for the safety systems, which are now going to be powered by NVIDIA computing technology. That's going to combine the onboard camera systems with the world's first standard LiDAR system, which is really an interesting twist as well. It's basically mounted sort of like a beluga whale bump on the top of the EX90 just behind the windshield. That's going to protect it in the event of an accident because it's a pretty expensive module. And it's going to be combining the data input from the LiDAR sensor with the camera sensors, with the radar sensors, the ultrasonic sensors, all of that kind of stuff to determine exactly what the system should do as far as active safety. Now, this is an area where Volvo has been a little bit less than detailed. Will this have a next generation of semi-autonomous driving setup from Volvo? We don't know that just yet. I would suspect that's coming at some point soon. No details are given, however. They have said it's going to have their pilot assist system, so pretty similar to what we find on current Volvo models, likely taken to the next level. It's also going to enable it to have more predictive software and hardware responses for things like animals in the road, cars in the road, different driving situations, etc. You can logically expect this to be the safest Volvo that they've ever built. And Volvo safety, of course, means a combination of active safety and passive safety. So if you're interested, Volvo's approach to safety, of course, includes active safety and passive safety both. Expect both of those components to be class-leading. Also, apparently class-leading will be the recycled content in the EX90. 15% of the steel, 25% of the aluminum, and 15% of the plastics used in the EX90 construction will be apparently post-consumer content plastic, or steel or aluminum. So that's really an interesting twist. Volvo is pushing not just towards their vehicles being very recyclable, but also using recycled content. Now, the other thing that we haven't heard exactly is, will this vehicle benefit from Volvo's push towards battery recycling? That's something that Volvo's been very active in. Will this contain post-consumer content lithium-ion battery components? That we don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if at some later date we found that to be true, however. We're still waiting for some answers from Volvo on those components. Now, in the meantime, let me know what you think about the EX90 down there in the comment section. I'm really intrigued because I love the look. I wasn't really that big of a fan of some of the renderings out there. I thought that they were inaccurate. I assumed that Volvo would stick pretty tried and true to the formula that has made their brand a success over the last decade, and indeed they have. I think that's just fine. I think that the design is a progressive, attractive, modest, and restrained design, exactly what Volvo wants for their brand. If you want something more exciting, there's the Polestar 3. The Polestar 3 is interestingly going to be built in the same factory in South Carolina as well, so it's probably also going to qualify for some portion of the tax credit, assuming its price tag is low enough. But if you're looking for 3 rows in your next EV, that's going to be the EX90. And the EX90 appears to be well positioned. Price tag-wise, it's going to be close to the R1S from Rivian, with an entirely different mission, obviously. We don't know where Rivian's pricing is going to take the R1S. I would expect that to accelerate because Rivian probably needs to make a bit more money on their vehicle at the moment than the EX90 will. I think the EX90 will be ultimately a little bit less expensive. It is significantly less expensive than the EQS SUV, about $25,000 less expensive most likely. It's also a lot less than the Tesla Model X. But there's going to be a new Kia EV9 coming on the scene in America just a little bit before the EX90 goes on sale. It also appears to be very boxy. And to be honest, if you close your eye just a little bit, I could see someone confusing the new Kia EV9 perhaps for an EX90, at least from a distance in profile. The Volvo obviously is going to be more premium, more recycled, more luxury content, more of everything that you would expect a Volvo to be. But the Kia could be a plucky, upstart, cheap option. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And of course, stay tuned, because hopefully I will be driving an EX90 at some point. But don't expect that to be until late 2023, so probably at least a year away. Until then, hit the subscribe button, and maybe I'll put a picture of the EX90 on my wall. See all of you later.